Thank you, everyone, for joining us today to talk about our latest version of Dangerous by Design. As many of you know, this is a report that we put out every 2 years looking at the trajectory across the country of road safety or danger for pedestrians. Um, I'm going to have us jump on to the next slide. I'm Beth Osborne. I'm the president and CEO of Smart Growth America. I'm going to be presenting along with my colleague Heidi Simon, but also with Joe Martinez, who is here representing Families for Safe Streets to tell his story of loss due to roadway design problems, and Councilor Nichole Rogers from Albuquerque. I really want to thank Joe and Councilor Rogers for joining us. This is so important to have the point of view of the people who are directly facing the ramifications of our choices for building roads in a dangerous way, but also the policymakers who can share with us what works and what doesn't, and how we can support their important work in pushing for a new approach to our roadway design. The SGA mission, the organization that I lead, is a country where transportation, housing, and development choices create communities that are healthy, prosperous, and resilient, no matter who you are or where you live. We help to create those communities that are healthy, prosperous, and resilient through direct technical assistance with local leaders, whether elected or civic, through research and analysis of what is and isn't working across the country. And from that, we develop our advocacy agenda, looking for the policies and approaches that need to change to get better results. Dangerous by Design, as we are releasing it this year, is one in a long series of this report that goes back to 2009. While a lot of our messages remain the same, and unfortunately, too many of our policies do as well, the resonance of the report and the number of people who pay attention to this issue now and collaborate with us to make a change has absolutely changed. It's a much larger, more active and aggressive group represented, I think, by so many of you being on this webinar. Dangerous by Design ranks states and the largest 101 metropolitan areas by pedestrian fatality rates. But I do want to point out that wherever people's communities rank, they are too dangerous. All American cities are too dangerous. So let's move on and look at what the latest version of Dangerous by Design is telling us. Since 2009, when we started issuing Dangerous by Design, there's been a 72% increase in pedestrian fatalities. I want to sit with that. A 72% increase. At this pace, the US will not return to 2009 levels of pedestrian fatalities, which were too high, until 2042. Now, what do I mean by that? If you look at the last 5, 6 years, you'll see that first we set a new horrible standard for pedestrian fatalities on our roadways. In COVID, when our roadways became wide open during the shutdown because people weren't traveling to work anymore, the design speeds of the roadways started to govern, and people started driving way, way, way faster on those roadways, and crashes became more deadly. We have seen a drop off here. You can see that drop off, but at that modest pace of drop off from a historic high, we can't get back to where we were in 2009 for, getting close to 20 years. And in that time, an additional almost 100,000 people will die. What I have found most frustrating is the number of people who have celebrated the fact that we are no longer at the historic high of roadway fatalities. So Heidi, give that a click. So I took the hump out. And instead of imagine a world where instead of us hitting a record high and then coming down from it, we just had a steady increase to today's awful fatality number. We would be talking about how this increase is unacceptable. But because first we hit a high, click that again, we can claim an improvement. And this is an unfortunate part of so much of the United States' approach to roadway safety. Any improvement, any step down from bad numbers is celebrated. So as a result, hitting record highs gives us the excuse to celebrate when those numbers are really only starting to return to the mean. And that is something that I do not support or condone. And I think we need to call out policymakers that celebrate that kind of improvement and demand that they raise their standards. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Heidi to walk folks through the findings of the report.
Thanks, Beth, and welcome to everyone joining us today. So as Beth mentioned, the report focuses on the pedestrian safety crisis across the United States. And you can see from what Beth just shared that we are still very much in that crisis, despite what some people in headlines would have you believe. On your screen here, you see a map of the 20 most dangerous metro areas for people walking, as well as the 20 most dangerous states. This map has not changed that much since the last time we produced the report in 2024 and looks very similar to previous reports going all the way back to 2009. The places that are killing people while walking are stubbornly still the places that are killing people while walking. A few things that have shifted that I want to call out is the fact that while Florida is still home to the most metro areas in our top 20, California is quickly catching up to the state. With 5 metro areas now joining the rings. We'll get into some of the details of what is happening in specific places on this map shortly. But I do want to just point out that it is not a coincidence or an accident that the places that are in the top 20 gravitate towards the southern southeast part of the United States. These are places that were developed largely after the invention and introduction of the personally owned automobile, and the development patterns look that way. The streets are wide, and the sidewalk and bike lane infrastructure is lacking to make sure that people who are driving in from the suburbs to those few urban places can get there as quickly and conveniently for them, oftentimes at the cost of the folks who are living near and around those very places. And so we will move on now through some more details around the report. In addition to ranking states and metro areas, the report also explores other trends within the pedestrian fatality data, including racial, age, and income breakdown. One of the things that I think is notable for Dangerous by Design and has been is the way that we calculate the risk of different populations. We know that the burden of traffic violence is not felt equally across all communities. And as you can see here on the screen, people of color, specifically American Indian and Alaska Native people, and Black or African American people are killed at much higher rates than the US average, and just increasingly so from previous reports. Diving into the statistics around metro areas specifically, Memphis for the second straight report is the highest ranking place for being the deadliest metro area for people walking. It has a pedestrian fatality rate of 5.5, which is the highest fatality rate that we've ever recorded in any edition of Dangerous by Design. And this year, 2 other cities have joined its rings in terms of breaking that fatality rate of 5, Albuquerque and Bakersfield, as you can see here. Another thing to note on the screen is that you can see that despite the discussion of progress that is being had by the federal government and some of their partners, you can see that the trends for these metro areas are moving in the wrong direction. The light red bar is their long-term trend over between 2015 and 2019, and the dark red line is their trend between 2020 and 2024. More people are dying at faster rates in these places and in many of the places that we studied in the report. 18 of the 101 metro areas are the only ones that saw decreases in their long-term pedestrian fatality rates. And in fact, it's a little bit misleading in the report if you just look at the rankings themselves. This is because while some places improved their rankings, in other words, moved down spots, for example, Charleston, South Carolina moved from spot 9 to 12, and Tucson, Arizona from 3 to 4, this does not mean that they are saving lives, that they're improving safety. They actually went the other direction. Their metro areas saw more pedestrian deaths over that time period. However, other places are getting worse faster. They are killing more people at higher rates. And so these places are places that benefited from other places getting more dangerous, which I don't think is a win for anyone. Another thing that I want to call out is the fact that only 5 of the 18 places that saw decreases this time around were places that also saw decreases in the previous report. And we know that without that long-term sustained change in the right direction, we're just going to continue to see the little blips that Beth mentioned in her overview of the national trends as well. States didn't fare much better. New Mexico has the highest pedestrian rate of all the states, and quite a big jump between New Mexico and the next highest state, which is Louisiana. It's notable that only one state within the top 20 saw a reduction or made progress between the reports, and that is the state of Delaware. Delaware actually had the largest reduction of any of the 50 states. So they are obviously taking steps in the right direction, but it is still the 10th most deadly state for people walking. And I think this really demonstrates some of the challenges that states have made for themselves in prioritizing the convenience and speed of vehicles over people for decades, and have now just created huge challenges that they have to overcome, and decades of infrastructure that they have to undo to really be creating safe places for people walking. We know that states have the power to significantly reduce pedestrian fatalities. Over half of pedestrian fatalities took place on state-owned roads in 2024, which is not that much different from previous reports. Something that is different is that they saw a drop of 4.93% of all roadway fatalities, which is pretty much on par with some of the drops that we're seeing nationwide. States that are able to be nimble, put in interventions that they know that work with communities firsthand to address some of the on-the-ground changes are seeing the results. They are improving. SGA has worked with a number of states to look at not only the types of projects that need to happen, but the type of changes that need to happen to their systems and processes. And when they do so, like in the state of Maryland, where the street on your screen is, they go from streets like this that clearly communicate to everyone around them that this is a street for cars, to something like this, where it's still a street for cars. Their vehicle traffic is able to get through just as conveniently as before, but there is now also dedicated protected space for people walking and biking where there wasn't. And so states like Maryland can be doing things to be that silver bullet and just taking a giant chunk out of our roadway fatality rates across the US. New for this year is that Dangerous by Design, for the first time, really looked to put the US in a global context. One of the things that we have talked a lot about internally at SGA is how the US compares to our peer nations. Where did we go wrong in comparison to other countries? And we want to see if some of our guesses were true. So what we did was we compared the US to 34 peer countries from across the world to see how we would rank, how we would rate among those. And what we saw was that as other countries made strides in terms of adopting policies, implementing projects, devoting resources to addressing safety concerns that are happening on their roadways, The US didn't. The US broke away from the pack in a very disturbing way. It increased by 45%, from just under 5,000 pedestrian fatalities to our current number of just over 7,000. But if the US had simply been able to stick with that pack, if we had moved in the direction of most of those 34 peer countries, we could have saved over 60,000 lives in the past decade. We could have brought home safely 63,441 lives that were otherwise lost to traffic violence in the last decade alone. And I think it's important to note that there is nothing that makes the US special in this context. There is no reason why we could not be on the same trajectory. And that's because we know what works. We do not need more studies or more plans or more research. What we need is dedicated resources and political will to get done what needs to get done. And that means changing the roads. This can be a hard decision to do, but it is one that literally saves lives. This is a street in one of the most dangerous places for people to walk, Memphis, Tennessee, the #1 place in this year's report. It is a place where fatalities have taken place. So city and state officials know that this road is not working. It is not serving the needs of the community. And you can see why in that middle picture. The orange, everything that's highlighted in orange in this picture is space that is currently given to cars and vehicles that could be taken away and repurposed for others without having a huge impact on thoroughfare or travel time. The areas that you see highlighted in red are those areas of conflict, those areas where people walking or biking are exposed to risk. And some of the things that you'll note is just very long driveways, redundant driveways, multiple driveways for same businesses, gaps in sidewalks and curbs, things that can be easily addressed and made better, as you can see in the third picture there, where you're not only able to improve safety, but the convenience and the enjoyment of people walking and biking with things like benches and trees and improved lighting, everything that communicates to all roadway users that this is a place where everyone is welcome, everyone is moving around, and it is going to encourage and require the safest behavior possible to do so. And so Smart Growth America, thought about the fact that if we know where we went wrong, if we know where we broke away from the pack, and we know what needs to be done, we should be able to return to that pack. We should be able to get back to where other countries are. And so we wanted to see what that would look like. On your screen here, the red line is the actual trend line for US roadway fatalities. The green line would be if we had just been able to stick with our 34 peer countries. If we had been able to maintain progress the same way they had in reducing roadway fatalities, where would we be? The blue line is admittedly a little ambitious. The blue line is what would happen if the US matched the 10 most improved countries. Probably wishful thinking on my part, but I think it's just notable that we're not asking for the stars here. We are asking for just a level of common sense decision making to take place that would allow for some of the interventions that we know work to be universally adopted across the United States. And in calculating this, what we realized was that, versus the over 11 deaths per 100,000 people that we are currently seeing, we would see 8.73 deaths per 100,000 people. And that's what SGA is going to start considering their standard of safety. Obviously, we want there to be 0 deaths on our roadways, and that should be the ultimate goal. But 8.73 deaths is really where we should be as a country if we are maintaining the same progress that is seen throughout the world. And so that's going to be our new minimum safety standard for what the US considers success. And the only time that we're going to allow federal government and their partners to claim progress or excitement over the reduction in fatalities, there's nothing to celebrate. Nothing to celebrate as we maintain that trajectory in the wrong direction, and no reason to pat ourselves on the back for just chipping away at a problem that we have created ourselves as a nation in previous decades. I'm going to pause there and transfer controls now to our guest speakers. Obviously, Smart Growth America and Dangerous by Design is one perspective on this crisis, but it's not the only perspective. And so we've invited a couple of our partners to join us today. I'm going to invite Councilor Nichole Rogers to share her screen. Councilor Rogers joins us from Albuquerque, New Mexico. She is also a participant of this year's Champions Institute with Smart Growth America, which is our technical assistance program for local elected officials. And I want to just welcome and say thank you to Councilor Nichole Rogers, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Thank you for having me. Thank you to everyone who's joined. I'm overwhelmed to see how many folks across the country really are championing this. It warms my heart because it is hard as elected officials to bring change to folks when it comes to roadways and what they've been used to and prioritizing cars over people. So my name is Nichole Rogers, and I have the honor of serving as District 6 City Councilor. I'm in my third year of office, and from the beginning, pedestrian safety was an absolute priority, and we knew, because we were ranked #1, that we needed to do some work. And I agree, and I wholeheartedly agree with Heidi that this is nothing to celebrate. So please don't ever confuse my excitement with the fact that we're #2, that's not what it's about, because that means too many people are still dying in my city and in my district where this stretch of road really is. So I'm going to be definitely mindful of that as we go along. But I want to share a little bit about what Albuquerque looks like. And in order to do that, I want to share a video for you all. Just to get an idea and level set of what we're talking about. And then I'd like to speak a little bit about some of the things that we have done over the last 2 years to ensure that we are closing this gap and wanting to get to the true north of 0 fatalities. And so I'm just going to share a video with you all.
This past year, Smart Growth America has labeled Albuquerque the 2nd deadliest city in the country for pedestrians. The 1-mile segment of Central Avenue in the International District is literally the most dangerous street in the country, and it has a lot to do with the design. We're designing to not care about how people safely get to food, to school, to urban parks, places of worship as well.
I lost a good friend. His name was Ramon. He got run over in front of the library. Many have sat eating supper with me, and by the time I look at the news at 10 o'clock, I see someone has been run over on Central. And I know, because they probably just ate with me at 3 o'clock, you know.
So the Central Avenue project is literally about having most impacted communities document their stories about how this is impacting them.
For us, making Central Avenue healthier and safer means putting more outdoor spaces and parks near Central Avenue, having more local ways to feed our families near Central Avenue, and also using Central Avenue safer.
What's exciting about working in the International District right now is that one of our city councilors has dedicated her capital outlay money to a participatory budgeting process that we've also become involved in.
We get $1.5 million a year to basically set aside on pet projects that we decide. Historically, the community has never had a say in where that money goes. So our participatory budgeting process really is about letting community tell us where we should spend our capital funding. Community will submit projects, they'll get to vote on those projects, and then we'll take those projects to the legislature and say, these are your constituents, this is what they want in their community.
It would be great to have a division of funding equitable for the International District. Just like the other parts of Albuquerque, we deserve it as well. It would be nice to have some more parks, bus stops, bike lanes.
There's a lot of bus stops that don't have shelters.
We need better lighting, buffers in the road, so if people accidentally step off the sidewalk, they're not this close to the car or the traffic.
Other strategies include finally getting the city, county, state, and federal government to commit the funds to the projects that they have been planning for decades. We want community to go through the process of understanding those solutions too. So we've been doing neighborhood activities with vision boards where community can see the possible solutions and vote on the solutions they want. We've already had Councilor Rogers say, I like looking at this board because it immediately tells me where constituents want me to focus my energy.
I feel so blessed to have the community that we have here. We have such amazing people who choose to live here, raising their families here, who are vested in making this district, in an international district, a place that people want to live.
I know that in the future, 5 to 10 years, we're gonna have a Central Avenue that is more accessible, where we're gonna have more young people reconnect to the outdoors and nature. We are gonna have more young people and their families understand what it means to have healthy and local food in our neighborhoods. That's our vision and that's our hope.
All right, so I'm going to try to navigate and stop the share, and so that folks can hopefully see us now. And so I just have to give a shout out to Together for Brothers, who's our community partner, who really helps us really with the community engagement and really making sure that we're listening to our community. And I'm so grateful to them. That was my first year in office when we recorded this video. And so the things that you saw on that video look a lot different today. And I wish that I had more pictures, and we'll make sure to get some after pictures. But we've spent the last 2 years really digging in and working. And so since that time, we have put in all of the pedestrian lighting has gone in on Central Avenue in my district and also in the abutting district in a partnership with our councilor in District 9, Renee Grout, to really focus on East Central, as we call it, which is where most of the pedestrian deaths are happening. We did do the road, we installed a bat lane so that on the sides, only right-hand turns are happening on that lane closest to the sidewalk with bus access, which has really helped a lot. We've put in some more hawk lights, which are signals folks can stop traffic to cross because there's so much space between crosswalks and crossing areas in our district. And we've installed a lot of fencing just as an early action project to see if it works to just change behavior by guiding folks where it's the safest place to walk. And now that that's showing success, we can potentially do something more pretty than what we have right now, but it is just something we can easily replace if it were to get hit, and it is deterring folks and getting them to the places that we need. We are also doing a lot of works around our schools. We have a Safe Routes to School project with Wilson and Whittier Elementary in my district, which these kids are not just fighting with roads, roadway access and safe crossings, but also societal and social issues of encampments and drug use and being propositioned on their way to school, causing kids to be afraid, turn around and go home and not go to school. And so we started a project, and this is something that came not from my office, but again, when we listen to community and provide them with the resources that they need, beautiful things happen. In this neighborhood, in our district, Elder Homestead, we have a couple of other neighborhoods that have really stepped up to take back their alleys and make those safe routes to schools. They're cleaning up the alleys, planting, painting murals in the alleys. And now instead of just having crossing guards help kids cross the street, these crossing guards are actually trained to walk them all the way to school, and they have different stops where they pick up more kids. It's a beautiful project. It's getting seniors out to be block captains with these kids to walk them safely to school. APS has just taken our school system, Albuquerque Public Safety, our public schools, has adopted this project and now got a Department of Transportation grant to take our project to 53 different schools in our district. And so we are leading by example, but we have such a long way to go. And we are committed to doing that work and to making sure that we continue to push for policy. The next policy thing that I really want to do is maybe ban right-hand turns citywide. As I'm looking at the data and seeing, just watching behavior, folks are really encroaching on our crosswalks because they're looking around to make a right-hand turn on a red. And so we could potentially make some policy changes on that way, which again will be a heavy lift, but I'm willing to do the work because this means people's lives. And I think that's what I continue to echo to folks. We've had city employees who have been hit on their way to work at our our Esperanza bike shop, who have been killed on their way to work for the city of Albuquerque. One of them being one of my daughter's schoolmates, Kayla Van Damingham, which I have to shout out her mom and her family, who really are stepping up as folks with lived experience of a horrible loss. That is what this is. This is not just abstract stories or abstract streets. And I just want to say, and I don't know how much time I have left, but I want to leave us with, like, no one should accept being on this list is inevitable, right? Because I keep hearing that, oh, it's inevitable. You're just going to have some of this happen. Every one of these tragedies represents a family member, someone's loved one. And this report that we just got, again, reminds me that these crashes they're not random accidents. They're often the result of streets that were designed for speed instead of safety. And my job is to help redesign those streets with the community and get the money and I hate the term political will. As a regular person whose grandma made me run for office, my grandma made me do it. I didn't want to. It's about saving lives, and that we should all take seriously. And that's what this data reflects, that, in Albuquerque, we've made significant investments, but we aren't at all done. And we have to do more, and we plan to do more. So everyone that's on this call, I just ask that there's 410 of us. I will just put out some good vibes. We've just applied for a Safe Streets for All grant to really do the ADA compliance work that we need to do and the right of way work that we need to do in order to elevate the safety for pedestrians. We've got to widen our sidewalks across this major corridor that was the mother road. We're celebrating the 100th anniversary of Route 66 here. And this city was very much built for the mother road of Central Avenue and cars. But we definitely have to make sure that it's not just the built environment, but it's also enforcement. We've seen enforcement drop off in some of these areas as well. And I think for us in my district, enforcement also has to be a part of the conversation and not just the built road environment. So thank you, Heidi. I hope that's enough time. I can talk about this for days, but thank you all for the opportunity.
We'll get more from you, Councilor, in the question and answer, I'm sure. But thank you for that and for sharing a little bit of Albuquerque's story. I'm going to hand it now to Joe Martinez, who is a prominent Fresno, California advocate for street safety and pedestrian rights, active in local politics and pedestrian safety committees following the tragic loss of his son, Paul, to a speeding driver in 2013. So Joe, I'm going to hand it over to you to share your story and experience, to just remind all of us as to why we do what we do.
Yes, thank you. Are you able to hear me?
Yep, you sound great, Joe.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, wow, there's amazing things going on across our country, that's for sure, especially in spite of this list that just came out. Yeah, I can't believe it. Our city of Fresno, located in the Central California, is once again on a list that no one should be on. And definitely it's not something we are proud of, something that we should never be on. Tragically, we actually moved up on the list. We were number 10, now we're number 7. So yeah, I just got so many raw emotions right now going on because those numbers represent someone's loved one, family member, and uncle, grandparent. In my case, it was Paul Martinez, my son, Paul. Paul, who was tragically struck and killed by a speeding driver. Never forget, June 5th, I got the call that no parent should ever get. It was the call that just really just shook me from just the core of my feet. all the way through my body. I got the call that my son was struck by a speeding driver. All I could think of was, no, this can't be happening. This can't be real. This has got to be a nightmare. But it was far from that. It was reality. I ended up at the hospital. I was brought into a room filled with doctors, nurses, caregivers, and all they could tell me was, we're trying, your son's been hit by a car. We're doing everything we can to save him. And just so many thoughts were racing through my mind as a parent, saying, no, this can't happen. No, this can't be possible. My son's only 21. He's getting started with life. He's barely begun to live life. He's got goals. He's got dreams. He's got his family. And next thing I know, I was brought into a bigger room, and there waiting in the emergency room were family members. Never forget it, where people were weeping and wailing and crying and sobbing. And it was horrible, horrible. And I'll never forget the look on the doctor's face as he came out of the hospital ER room and walked up to me. And all I could do was just say, God, please, no, no, no. And he just said, Mr. Martinez, I'm sorry for your loss. And so it's just something you'll never forget as a parent. And so Paul, who was 21, prime of his life, enjoyed basketball, enjoyed his church. He was a member of the Boys and Girls Club, was a volunteer, just loved life like any 21-year-old. And his entire life was just wiped out because of someone who was driving reckless, was speeding, was actually traveling 54 in a 40-mile designated area. I'll never forget seeing my son's face for the last time. I remember going into the room by myself. I could barely just get enough strength to be able to walk up to him, tell Paul I loved him, I miss him. I remember kissing his forehead and going home after that. It was so surreal. And I remember looking into the mirror, and I remember seeing blood on my hand and still blood on my face when I kissed Paul for the last time. And that really, really struck me and stayed with me for a while. Eventually, months had passed, and I knew that I had to do something, because like many parents out there and loved ones who experienced this tragedy that God forbid no one should experience, I had all these emotions, but at the same time, I wanted to do something, and I wanted to connect with someone. And I knew I had to do something. I knew I had to say something, and I wanted to make a change, because no one, especially parents, should ever have to experience our pain in order to have safe streets. And so thankfully, I was able to connect with my local council member. She told me about an active transportation committee. I got involved with them. It was a committee that was made up of community members who were wanting to make a change in their community around street safety. I remember being the only committee member that was focused on pedestrian safety. Every other member was really focused on bike safety, but I knew that there had to be a voice for our pedestrians. And so I did get involved at the local level. I was able to find my voice. I was able to channel my pain into purpose. And I was able to see that I was making a difference. Just one parent can make a difference. I advocated for Vision Zero, which we're all familiar with. I met with local leaders asking for policy change around safe streets. I advocated for bike lanes so that people on their bikes could feel safe while riding their bikes. From there, I got involved at the state level, and I found an organization called Cal Walks. This is a statewide agency focused, again, on walkable communities and safe communities. I was able to actively advocate at the state level. And again, I found my voice, and I found other people like me who were active in street safety. From there, I returned back to my community and continued to advocate. From there, I met an organization, an amazing, amazing organization made of parents, loved ones who have experienced pain with their loved ones being impacted by traffic violence. So I met this organization called Families for Safe Streets. This organization is an advocacy agency. It focuses on street safety and infrastructure and transportation. And again, just the focus being on pedestrian safety. And what I had learned from this organization, I was able to bring it back to my community and continue to make an impact in our city of Fresno. There, I was able to find one champion at our city hall who was willing to take on and make changes. As earlier, we heard someone say political will. And that's what it came down to. It came down to our local leader having the political will to stand up and recognize that something needed to be done. And that's exactly what happened. This city leader championed Vision Zero. This city leader took on infrastructure improvements and safety improvements. This person even was able to secure federal funding and even secured $100,000 so that we could have a traffic victim memorial built in remembrance of traffic victims. That's the kind of person we need fighting for us at the local level, the state level, the national level. And so I was able to find that person. And because of this champion, I was able to find my voice and find my purpose so that no parent would experience my pain, so that we could have safe streets for our kids, our community, our neighbors. Just like the Dangerous by Design street, I was sad to see that if you were from a low-income neighborhood or if you were a person of color, that you were more likely to be struck and injured or killed by a driver. And as sad as it is to say, we see that happening even in our community. And so, when I see that and I heard that again, it just tells me more work needs to be done, and we're just getting started. The bottom line is every life matters. And as one of our council members said, and I'll never forget him saying this, he said, 0 is the only acceptable number. And so every time I see this council member, he always says that to me. Right, Joe? 0 is the only acceptable number. And I would say, yes, you're right.
Is. It really is the only acceptable number. And that's the end goal, but we need to see much bigger gaps in progress. I want to thank folks for putting comments in the chat and using the question and answer function. We have time now to hear from our speakers. Beth, I'm going to toss it to you first. There's been a couple of questions on vehicle design and the role of vehicle design and what the federal government is or isn't doing, and how that informs what we're seeing. So if you can just reflect on that for a little bit.
Yeah, actually, the New York Times did an incredible story on this yesterday, looking at the role of increasing vehicle size on pedestrian fatalities. And it shows that instead of hitting people low, pushing them on top of a car, it hits them in their chest and head and pushes them under the car. And this increases the likelihood that a crash, even at a lower speed, will be fatal or highly injurious. I believe the New York Times estimated that it is the increasing size of vehicles. And again, I just have to say, huge blind spots to the driver. We love to claim that we have an auto-centric transportation system, but it's incredibly hostile to the driver. We continuously set up the driver to fail and then blame the driver rather than the people who are setting them up to fail, which is often the designers of the road and the designers of the vehicle. But the New York Times estimates that the increasing size of vehicles is responsible for about 10% of the increase in pedestrian deaths. That's an unconscionably large amount of increase. Unfortunately, we've had a 72% increase. So it's a yes and situation. We need to grapple with the not just the size of vehicles, but the design of them, so that the driver can actually see the road in front of them. I've seen people propose that we put in front cameras. And so for the driver to be able to see the road in front of them, they would have to take their eyes off the road to look at the screen. That is in a nutshell what is wrong with the country. But in my understanding, Congress isn't doing a thing to address this. There are other countries that are looking at things like having the hood slant downwards. So even if the vehicle is taller, there's a better sight line and it's less likely to hit in the chest and face. But there's a lot that we need Congress to do there, and we certainly need our state legislators and Congress to actually make the agencies who take their salaries from us, the taxpayer, to create designs that lead to better behavior and protect us rather than create dangerous conditions. I will also say there's a lot of folks that go straight to cell phones and distracted driving. Yep, human foibles are a big problem. Humans make mistakes and humans do silly things, but we really struggled to put this in the international context. And I understand we're very America centric. We forget that cell phones and distraction exist outside the United States. It just doesn't lead to the same level of danger. And alcohol is available outside of the United States. In fact, some pretty fine alcohol is available outside the United States. Where we differ from the rest of the world is we do not look at all at the role of road design. And that really shows us that break between us and our peers. We also don't look at vehicle design, and both need substantial focus going forward.
Thanks, Beth. I want to get, I think this will touch maybe a few questions that are coming in. We'll start with Councilor Rogers and then move to Joe about, very briefly, just about combating pushback, community pushback or pushback from other local elected officials or practitioners. How do you tackle that? How do you keep fighting in the face of some of that?
It's through education and outreach. A lot of times, many of our elected officials just simply don't know or aware. So it's through outreach, it's through education, it's about building connections, building relationships with folks, one person at a time, one council member at a time. Those who are doing the pushback often just don't know, and it's no fault of their own. It's just that they don't know. So it's through our outreach and education that we're able to do that. And again, as I said, you start with one and eventually you build a network, because we did start with one council member, and now all 7 of our council members know who Families for Safe Streets are. They know what we're about. They know what we represent. Recently, I was at the Vision Zero adoption, where our council members were getting ready to vote on it. And our champion at City Hall called me by name and said, "I see that Joe Martinez is in the audience. Wanted to thank him and the Families for Safe Streets." And then right after that, the vote took place, and it was unanimous. All 7 of our council members voted for Vision Zero.
Wow, that's really impressive, Joe. Councilor Rogers, how do you deal with some of that pushback that you're hearing or seeing?
Yeah, I think for me, I go back to the stats. And I think what's always worked for me in my career is showing people the amount of deaths. And are you okay with that? If you're okay with that, then keep doing nothing. But most people aren't going to say publicly, I'm okay with I'm okay with that. So I just keep letting the numbers speak for themselves and putting it in their faces and saying, still need to do more, because it's still too many. And I think in my district, I get a lot of pushback because we, the area of our stretch of road, which I saw in one of the question and answers around, the fatalities for pedestrian deaths, are they housed or unhoused people, right? Because we have a lot of folks experiencing homelessness. And so I always hear that, well, it's just because people are homeless, or it's because they're on drugs and they're passed out on the It's usually actually not that when you look at the data. It's not someone that passed out from drugs and fell over on the road. Do we have one or two of those cases? Yes. But in most cases, other pedestrians help out and make sure they don't get hit in the road and move them away from the road. And so what I'll say to that, what I often say to that, it doesn't matter if they're housed or unhoused. They are a human being, and it is our job, as I see it in government, is to reduce suffering and reduce harm. And so that's what I'm going to continue to do. And I'm never going to prioritize you and your car over a pedestrian or a bicyclist. And if that's a problem for you, then it's okay. You can not vote for me next time. That's okay. Because I don't make decisions on people's lives based on votes. Straight up. And so I'm bold enough in my own self to not have a problem with the pushback. And as the people trusted me to do this role and do this work, and I'm going to push as hard as I can while I'm here.
Great. And I think, Nichole, your mention of quick builds as well, those tactical urbanism projects, those temporary street design changes can really help and demonstrate to people, those non-believers, that the sky does not fall when we make some of these changes.
Yes, and I think I saw a question in there about that, like quick builds, and some other officials in their city are opposed to them. And what would I say to make them comfortable? And for me, it's about trying it out. I come from medical background, and so we have to try, like, you have to make sure you try something before you change a whole policy for all of the nurses, right, in the hospital. So you try things and you pilot them and you research them. And that's exactly what a quick build allows you to do. It's cost effective because you can do it quickly, most likely inexpensively. You can track the data, show that it works, and then make the case for the larger investment for a more permanent part. And it is hard. I saw some folks reacting to fencing for pedestrians, and sadly, we do have to steer folks, and it does feel like herding, I say not cattle, but angry wet kittens who want to do what they want to do, right? And sometimes we just have to help folks from themselves, and that is just the truth of, and it is sad and it is hard, and we do need to figure out how to get back to community accountability. How do we act and move in community? And we have to be bold and to call people on it when they're not doing that. And there's a really great guy that's from Brazil that's a crossing guard for a school, and he's going viral right now because he jumps on the back of people's like mopeds if they're in the crosswalk and beats them over the head with a plastic hammer, but making the case and tells them, get back, because we have to hold each other accountable on how we're in our roadways also. And it's not just up to cars. It's not just up to people in cars. It's also up to the other road users too, that we're doing the right thing out in these streets.
Thank you. And thanks for taking time and sharing your expertise, Joe and Councilor Rogers. I'm going to hand it back over to Beth to share a little bit about what's next for Dangerous by Design and wrap us up for today.
Yeah, we're going to do another webinar looking at solutions. This was a lot about the problem, but and you got to hear a bunch of solutions from Councilor Rogers, who is out there taking no excuses and saying that we can take control of this situation. So stay tuned. There's going to be a lot more content over the summer. There are a bunch of people in the question and answer and the chat talking about so many other areas that we need to dig into, and I can't tell you how much I would love to do a full report just on injuries and so many other areas. This report is a big bite for us, so we understand that there's more that needs to be done, and we hope to be able to get to it as funding allows. And speaking of funding, one thing that we have repeatedly found when we work with transportation and public works agencies is one of the biggest reasons they are unwilling to deviate from the highway-based standards is fear of lawsuit. And that only goes one way. Any attempt to narrow lanes or add crossings or do things that make to slow traffic and provide space for bicyclists and pedestrians. Those are the changes from and deviations from standards that worry agencies that they will be sued. The other way, the opening up roadways to faster speeds and things that are more likely to lead to roadway fatalities do not come with the same fear of lawsuit. We are doing some research into what the actual law says and when are public works agencies and departments of transportation liable for the condition of the roadways and conditions and designs that lead to fatal crashes. This is something I have wanted to do for decades because every single interaction with any agency, this comes up as the biggest reason why they won't look at building a complete street. Unfortunately, this has been very hard for us to fund, so we're trying something new. And we are asking folks if they are willing to donate to an effort so we can bring in some legal interns and some experts to help us put this together and do some real research behind this. If if you are unable to give, which I certainly hope you are, I'll take any information you have as well. But at the very least, I would like to even the scales there a little bit so that council within agency is at least as afraid of dangerous designs as they are afraid of deviating from a highway-based standard. So we'll see how this works out. And if it works out well, we might be able to dig more into areas of work that maybe are not as easily funded through traditional means. So thank you to everyone for joining today and for considering that request.